Venus Fridays. We are so excited to be here with you again today to talk about what's going on with Venus and in the sky and astrology wise. So let's just jump right in. First thing is Venus is conjunct Neptune today, which is so much going on with that, right? Do you want to lead us off there, Cayelin?
Well, so Venus has been doing this dance with Neptune. This is like the third conjunction. And the first two were in Pisces, and this one's in Aries. And again, these are the things that are letting us know that this really is an Aries Pisces cycle, not just an Aries cycle and not just a Pisces cycle for Venus. She is doing the dance between Aries and Pisces and continuing on and continuing to tell us, yes, you're on the right track. Yes, this is what's happening. Yes, thank you for noticing. And if you think about Neptune being most like Pisces, but it's now in the sign of Aries for the next 14 years, and Venus is catching up to Neptune in Aries for the first time in 165 years, or maybe not quite 165 because 14 years in a sign, so it would have been in, but at the early degrees, at the 0 degree Aries point, at the alpha point, at the beginning point, that is what's happening. And it's just like, oh, so what are the messages? What's the inspiration and information coming through for us around this? And if we think about Neptune being connected to the field of all possibilities, and Venus in Aries, she loves to take action. She's fierce. She wants a mission. She wants a purpose. She needs something to take action for. So Neptune's helping provide the vision, and they've already had two encounters, and now this is their third encounter. So this is like the time when, and she's now moving direct and moving forward, and has already gone through the first gate, and releasing the blocks around the crown chakra. So here we are at this time of her being able to move forward into a new vision, new possibilities, and take the action necessary to make that happen.
It's so exciting. I love that like their two meetings were in Pisces and now in Aries, right? Again, like you said, like Pisces, Aries, Aries, Pisces is so huge this year into next year and so huge with this Venus cycle. And I think of Neptune as being the place that, right, we have to go inside to find our internal compass, and it's the place that like helps us connect into our heart, and then from that place we can connect into the heart of the universe or spirit or the goddess. And now the divine feminine planet is with that. So it's like the way that we tune into our divine feminine, our inner power, Aries, our own individuation, like is the place that then connects us out into the collective, which we were just talking about in our last class so much about that place, that meeting of our own personal healing heart so we can stand more in our power, and then how we can help serve the world coming into greater balanced empowerment as well. So I think there's like such a beautiful opportunity and just more emphasis on all the energy that's been happening right now so
Yeah, and
much.
if you think about 165 years ago when Neptune last went into Aries, we weren't probably in this Venus cycle.
Right.
Right. So it wasn't doing the dance that's been happening. And Neptune only passed the 0 degrees Aries point once. It didn't go back into Pisces and then back into Aries like it's doing now. So it's really putting the spotlight on this dance between the two. And yes, that the I am and the we are of the Aries Pisces. How is that? So what action? I guess this is a thing to think about. And here we are. What's the action we're ready to take? Maybe it's letting go of things and then seeing what you want to move toward. I mean, we're living in a world that feels like it's dissolving in what we've known, and something else is getting ready to come in. So how are we being with that dissolution and allowing it to happen and not trying to fight it?
Yeah, well said. Yeah, that is. Yeah, we could like end the video right there. And I'm like, yeah, perfect. That, yeah, there's our lifetime lesson right there. Thank you for distilling that down, Caitlin, into
I
one.
didn't even know that's what I was going to do, but thank you. That's so
And
good.
and that leads so perfectly into we were talking about, right? Beltane is coming with well, depending upon when you celebrate it, but we'll talk about how we celebrate it. And then that's happening with Pluto going retrograde and there's a lot happening and that first quarter moon, like all those are connected together. So I'm excited to talk
Yeah,
about that.
and I think, I mean, Beltane probably once upon a time was around the 1st or 2nd of May, when the sun literally reached the halfway point between the March equinox and the June solstice, 15 degrees Taurus. But now it reaches that point either on May 4th or May 5th, usually on May 5th, but this year it happens to be May 4th. At least in our part of the world, it'll be May 5th. In some parts of the world, for some people, it'll be May 5th. But the thing I love about May 4th is it's Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. So how fun is that? And Pluto's also stationing retrograde that day. So how fun is that? And taking us deeper into being able, it's so much like the Venus cycle, if you think about it, because Venus is making her descent into the underworld to uncover and release transform the shadow pieces so that she can step more into her power, to do the alchemy and step into her power. Pluto going retrograde, same story, just in a slightly different part of the sky that's happening. So, and that's happening at that exact halfway point. Now, another thing about the Beltane point, or the cross quarter point, is that it's the between. It's exactly between a solstice and an equinox. And many cultures, and Celtic people particularly, saw it as a time when the veils were thin and you had more access to other realms and dimensions. And so with Pluto also going retrograde and it's in that still point, it's at that pause point, that between point where the greatest alchemy can happen, feels amazing.
Yeah. And I love that it's happening also with the first quarter moon, which like, right, we'll put Pluto is going retrograde. It's so amazing. And we'll neglect sometimes like those quarter moon points, but they're like a between place as well, between the new moon and the full moon. And I like to look at like those 4 phases as just these check-in points, right? A weekly check-in, like where am I at with my intention of the past new moon? Where am I at with this Venus gate and my intention around the crown chakra? Where am I at with my shadow work with Pluto going retrograde, right? So I love that that's there and it's in Leo. So it's
And it's
really like,
at
where
the
do I love myself too? But yeah, go ahead.
at the fifth, it's 14, almost 15 degrees Leo, which is the exact halfway point between the June solstice and the September equinox. And so, yes, and in Leo, it's like, how are we loving ourselves or not loving ourselves? And really, in order to have healthy self-love, we have to have done our shadow work.
Completely,
So
right?
Pluto is going retrograde that day, going, yep, don't forget about me. Venus is on her
Exactly.
descent into the underworld. Don't forget about whatever it is that we need to uncover and release and let go of here. And so this is so powerful to have a first quarter moon on Beltane at also that the degrees of a cross quarter point. So the sun being at 15 Taurus and the moon will be at 15 Leo sometime during that day. The exact first quarter moon, it's 1421, so it's almost 15.
It works for me. I
Works
don't
for
get caught up in those minutes too much, but
me.
yeah.
Yeah, like the preciseness of it. It's like, yeah, some people get really geeked out on like if they take a hike or they do a run or whatever, they have to have it down to the tenth of a.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're talking about these like huge celestial bodies, it's easy to lose sight of that when you're like at 36 minutes and but it's a huge thing. One question I have for all of you in the Southern Hemisphere, as well as for you, Kaylin, something I've been thinking a lot about lately is, well, is it Beltane if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, or is it actually Samhain? And that's, because it's a cross quarter of the seasonal experience. So any of you in the Southern Hemisphere, I'd love to hear,
And do they even call it Beltane, Samhain, Lammas, or Lughnasadh, or whatever those names are? Because those really originate from the Celtic culture. So the Aboriginal cultures of, south of the equator may have had something completely different. And were they even tracking the cross quarters? I have no idea. That's such a good question.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll bet you, yeah, yeah, it would be. Okay, and then I think the last thing we wanted to touch on, very still Beltane related, is that Scorpio full moon coming on the 12th, right? The 12th, is that what we said? The 12th?
Yes, it's the 12th.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Okay, thanks. So,
Yeah. So, and it's in a part of the sky. So it's in the sign of Scorpio, opposite the Taurus sun. So it's the Scorpio full moon, but it's in the scales, also known as Libra, but it's not the seasonal sign. It's the constellation, so we call it the scales. And it's really going to be sitting kind of between two stars that mark the pan of the scales, Zubin el-Janubi, and which is closer to the ecliptic, and Zubin el-Shamali, which is above, and the moon will be somewhere around there at the time of the full moon, more closely zodiacally aligned with um, Zubin el-Shamali, but probably more closely seen next to Zubin el-Janubi. Or having just passed Zubin el-Janubi. And so what are we weighing? Are we weighing, and I've been thinking about like looking at the truth. What is the truth of what's really going on? And there's so much misinformation, disinformation. Sometimes you think you might know something and then you find out later that that wasn't really true. Or there was a perspective or a way of looking at things and then it becomes not the way of looking. So how are we weighing the truth of who we are and really recognizing that it's our divinity, that we are divine beings, and that is the truth. But there's so many things that can get in the way of that, or that are in the way of that. So in Scorpio, and with the Pluto retrograde and all the other things we've talked about, it's like really shining a light on the places where we're not seeing ourselves as divine beings, as representative of the divine. And how do we begin to shine the light on that and do the alchemy to transmute and transform that?
I love that. One last thing I'll just say about that full moon too is in the priestess training that I did, she taught us about that the solstices and the equinoxes were sun based, right? Solar, it could be masculine, right? Different cultures looked at the sun in different ways, but that the cross quarters could really be associated with the moon. And right, like you were saying before we started recording, like the full moon closest to Beltane being like a feminine way of looking at the cross quarters, right? And connecting into that energy, even though it's not that exact midpoint of when the sun reaches 15 degrees of Taurus, but there's that, you could even maybe look at like that in between place, or the place where we connect into the cross quarters being the feminine energy that doesn't have to be on an exact timing, is very fluid.
I love what you're saying, because it is the ancient Celtic cultures, the way they celebrated any point, cross quarter, solstice, equinox, whatever, it was the new moon, full moon closest to the cross quarter. It wasn't sun based necessarily for them. It was moon based. And they would have 2 week celebrations from a new moon to a full moon, or from a full moon to a new moon. And of course, they weren't looking at the new moon when it was conjunct the sun, because they couldn't see that. They would wait and then for that tiny crescent new moon to show up, is because they could have a visceral visual experience of that as the light of the new moon, the new cycle starting. And then the full moon, of course, you can't miss.
Yeah.
So what an amazing time we have. Oh my gosh, this is so good. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap it up?
I feel like we've covered a lot. So yeah.
All right. Happy Venus Fridays to you. And here we are, right? This will be perfect from the new moon to the full moon. We can just have the whole cross quarter time fill in all that space. I love it.
Beautiful.